Scatter shooting again today. I am out looking around and taking an imprecise aim at the world around me. And one of the things that I've been sort of scatter shooting at has been the general trend of our society, our global thrust, as it were. Where's it going? And one of the things that I think about, of course, is the results of what we're doing as it is reflected in how we live. And the way that we are living is becoming more and more particularized. Our institutions are getting less and less credible. They are becoming, and we are becoming almost atomized as a society, so that the institutions and organizations that were very much the bedrock of our country for a very long time have been disintegrating. And they've been disintegrating on purpose. There are those who want those organizations destroyed. They want them atomized. And I've been thinking about that, and of course, you get mad at that. And then I'm thinking, well, why should I be mad at that, really? One of the things that I like to think about is apocalypses. And I think one of the most remarkable things is that apocalypses oftentimes have happy endings. And that is that the divine hierarchy works things out so that these apocalypses end up propelling us forward. They are not ultimately destruction, where there's no exit. And so it is with also the atomization of our society. So science is working really hard behaviorally and on many, many fronts to work their way. And as they do, what science does is it stops things. Science, to find out what something is, science must stop it. Stop it in its tracks so we can take a look at it. Do you want to know how it lives? Kill it. Take it apart. If you want to know what an atom is, bust it apart. So this is the game of science to a degree. It's a take it apart, bust it, break it, smash it, stomp it kind of worldview, which they have cloaked in some sort of respectability. But, really in some ways it's just, personality run wild. And these scientists are really just egomaniacs, a lot of them. And you can see that pretty clearly on the news on any given day. But there's a consequence to that the scientists don't understand. And that is the psychic power and force that the divine hierarchy will continue to have on the world around. So as we are atomized and we are blown apart, as it were, by science and by technology, which has its own ends in mind, we lose sight of the fact that the energy it took to blast all that stuff apart is, though it's considerable, is not nearly equal to the energy that's going to bring all that stuff back. It is, gravity has mass. And when a certain amount of mass is achieved, you get enormous amounts of gravity. Well, the reality that has been blown apart by our behavioralists and humanities departments of our great universities and has been atomized to its most final degree, well, what happens then? Well, it's all going to be coming back together again, as the mass of all of that stuff is going to begin to attract itself back together. And that shape that it takes as it comes back together is divine. And that is the most wonderful thing about the apocalyptic reality, that things come back together again, and the divine has a way of asserting itself in ways that most of us could never even think about. So it's really important to keep that perspective when things look so bleak and we're trying to fight against the iconoclasts of science as they break apart all of the institutions and all of the aspects of our society that they can possibly break apart. They're going to break apart everything because they think they can put it together in a way that will suit them. Oh my. They are not the first to have thought such things. But in every case prior, what they thought would be the outcome was not. They are masters of destruction, but they can't put things back together again. And that's the lesson that we all should learn. They can take it apart, but they really can't put it back together. And who can put it back together again? Well, it's those who are connected to the divine hierarchy who are responding to their own call. So that's why I really offer up the idea to begin your wilderness work, because we're going to be atomized. You are going to be an atomic particle out there in the wilderness. You better learn how to survive and to understand what's going on around, because the divine hierarchy is still available. It's still there. And we can still connect to it, even though we are atomically small. Nevertheless, the consolidation of the psychic energy that's going to happen after our scientists and politicians and technologists have finished their work, it's going to be magnificent, because there are those who will maintain the order of the day. The analogy I like to use on this, it's a little off the wall, but go with me a little bit on it, is the plight and the glory of the Sufis. The Sufis, as I understand it and through my reading, really came about through Zoroaster. They came from the Avesta. They are Zoroastrians. They are Persians. And they have a legacy of Mani. M-A-N-I, Mani. And that's where they come from. And the idea that the Sufis are Islamic is kind of, yeah, they are, kind of, think, but maybe not. Maybe they are really universal in their understanding. And because of the relationship with early Sufis and Muhammad, of which there was apparently a very sympathetic relationship, a word I very much like, sympathy. So there was a sympathetic relationship between Muhammad and the Zoroastrians. And the Zoroastrians eventually evolved to become Sufis in and amongst the followers of Muhammad. So there has been a kind of mutual respect, a mutual understanding, a sympathy which has occurred between the Sufis and Islam, at least in its inception. But what has happened over the years is that Islam has tried very hard to exterminate the Sufis, because they really want an orthodox Islam. They want to be Wahhabis, fundamentalists. So there's a constant struggle between the Sufis of Islam and the fundamentalists. And that truce, that peace, that sympathy exists on and off occasionally by murder. I mean, the funny part of this is that for a long time, and pretty recently, fundamentalists of Islam were debating whether or not it was okay to kill a Sufi. That's a pretty astounding thing. But nevertheless, the Sufis have existed, and they have prospered throughout Southeast Asia and around the world, and here in the United States a little bit. And I think that that's the The future for us is to be in a hostile world to a degree, but managing to be true to who we are to such a degree that there is, even in the fundamentalists, a sympathy. And of course, what I mean by fundamentalists now are the techno-fundamentalists, the fundamentalists of bureaucracy. They are the fundamentalists. Their worldview is their orthodoxy. And it's really important to pay attention to that because they have an orthodoxy and they have a worldview and they are working like the dickens to implement it. And that's why the larger society is being atomized. We are being kind of systematically turned into particulate because it's part of their orthodoxy. We cannot exist with the current structure of our society in the eyes of the orthodox technocrats. They have their own kind of moral code, and it's shared by bureaucracy. So there's an imperial kind of mind that's beginning to assert itself in larger and larger degrees, and it means then that the older institutions are becoming atomized. We are atomized. And so as these unique little particles, we are waiting for our opportunity to then be redrawn back into a right relationship with the divine. We will gravitate back toward the divine, and we will coalesce, and that coalescing will birth something quite new. So the atomization of who we are, which you could consider an apocalypse of sorts, will have a happy ending. And so I ask you, and I hope you will join me in a wilderness experience as an atomic particle of the divine hierarchy out there bouncing around, and it's a lonely little world. We are not going to have the comfort of institutions. And like Sufis, we might be hunted down and murdered, for being a free thinker. Just as Shirawardi was murdered because he was not orthodox. He was heterodox. And it cost him his life. But he lived true to his principles. He did not recant. He was not martyred in their eyes. He was not a martyr. But nor did he recant. So that's an important consideration. Yeshua did not recant. And that is our challenge, to live in the wilderness, to find ourselves and prosper, and to find sympathy for others, and to join in the divine hierarchy as it unfolds and expands and reveals itself. Amen.